Good afternoon, everyone. Um, my name is Igwe Patrick, and I am the Communications and Partnership Manager for Passion Incubator. So I would like to welcome everyone to the call. Thank you all for joining. And it seems like it's a minute past 1, but we will be giving 5 minutes for more people to join the call. Currently, we had a large number of people register and would like a good number of people to come into the call before we start. So I would like to indulge everyone for a 5 minutes interval before we start the call or before we start. I'm sure everyone is expecting to hear from our host or our guest speaker, Omosalewa. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrongly. So yes, let's just enjoy the music while we wait. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Can someone just confirm that I'm audible?
Yes, sir, you are very audible.
Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the call. I know that we would have probably double this number ultimately at the end of the call or even more. So before those of us who joined in early, well, thank you for coming in on time. Just by way of introduction, my name is Lawal Abiodo. I work with FCMB, where I head Tech Ecosystem and Ventures Department. This is our stable program, or should I call it staple program, that we run from time to time. So welcome to Insider Series. Just a brief background on Insider Series. It's a program that we've been running for years now. We used to call it Epic Hour, but for a particular time now, we would be delving in getting insights from specific people who are experts in their industry on relevant things that we think that the general startup ecosystem would like to listen to. And on this particular series, we are talking to Omoshalewa Adeyemi, the Senior Vice President at Flutterwave, in charge of global expansion and partnerships. And she will be telling us essentially what the journey has been for her, leading Flutterwave into what 10 countries, I believe, is where, or is it 10 or 20 now? Sorry, pardon me. I think 10 or 20 countries where they are now operating from. So I look forward to hearing from Omoshalewa, but then just to also say that it's not Flutter, no, sorry, pardon me, please. Insider Series has been, has hosted quite a lot of people, and we have records where you can easily access them. We have a podcast online. We'll share the link to the podcast here where you can listen to past Insider Series. We also have a YouTube channel where we also document past Insider Series or past Epic Hour as it used to be called. And we've had conversations with people like Shola Kenade, Eniolorunda Tosin of Team Apt. We've had Chinedu Azudo from Max.ng. We've had Shegun Adeyemi from Amplify. So the content there is really rich. We hope that you guys can interface with the content on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. So that's enough introduction for now. I know we want to get into the crux of the matter. So I'm going to just bring Omoshalewa on. Omoshalewa, first of all, congratulations, Omoshalewa. I saw the announcement on your nomination, yourself and the other senior executives at Flutterwave. I believe you were nominated to a global fellowship or a global leadership fellowship. I've been trying to recall the name now, but it's not coming back to mind easily. So sorry about that. But again, congratulations. I'm sure you know what I'm congratulating you on. All right, Omoshalewa, if you will, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, sorry. Thank you very much for the congratulations. There was a little bug that I needed to take care of. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to meet everyone, albeit virtually. My name is Omoshalewa Adeyemi. Everyone calls me O. I am the Senior Vice President for Global Expansion and Partnerships at Flutterwave. I have been with the company for about 5 years and scaled across 19 African markets, as well as ongoing scale expansion into markets outside of Africa. I will be giving a just very brief talk on some of the things I've learned in my 5-year journey at Flutterwave. By all means, this is not the Bible to expansion. I'm sure we all have different experiences when we're expanding, especially as it relates to our industries, but more so as it relates to our companies. So please just take whatever I say today as a general guideline. And of course, feel free to modify to suit your needs. You can stop me at any point to ask questions, but I believe there's also some dedicated time at the end of my talk for questions. But again, happy to take questions as we go along. I don't want to assume that everyone is familiar with Flutterwave, so I will begin by introducing the company. Now that I've introduced myself, Flutterwave is a payment technology company. We've been around for just over 6 years. We're headquartered in San Francisco with our largest operational base and second headquarters in Lagos, Nigeria. At the core of it, we have a simple goal, and that is to simplify endless possibilities for payments, not only in Africa, but across the globe. What does that actually mean in practicality? I think many of us as Africans are familiar with how challenging digital payments or how fragmented digital payments on the African continent can be. In some of our respective countries, I don't know if everyone from here is from Nigeria, but I will speak to the continent in general. I think that generally speaking, across our individual countries on the continent, to a certain extent, digital payments might have been figured out and be less fragmented. But when you look at the continent as a whole, you will observe across the 54 countries that we have about 41 currencies in circulation, and we have over 300 types of digital payments, many of which are not interoperable. And so for you as an individual or as a business owner, when you're trying to expand your business or just transact with people across geographies or across currencies or across payment types, it can be quite a nerve-wracking process. And so what Flutterwave does is build a Pan-African payment infrastructure that connects the different digital payment types that we have across these continents so that it's easier for you as an individual or business owner to transact with other individuals or businesses across the continents. For those of you that are familiar with the company, you probably already also know that we have 2 primary products. We have a product called Flutterwave for Business, which is literally everything that a small business, an enterprise, a corporate needs to operate their business from a financial perspective. So the ability to accept payments, the ability to send payments. Very soon, we will be launching a loan product that will provide businesses access to working capital. And then on the consumer side, in Nigeria at the moment, we have a product called Bata, which is really your international passport when it comes to transacting with other individuals, making payments to merchants, or shopping on global websites across the world. If there are no questions, I will jump right into what we're titling the International Expansion Playbook. Is that okay, Abiodun? Yes? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. So as a business owner, if the question of international expansion comes to your mind, there are a few questions that I really would advise and recommend that you ask yourself before you embark on the journey of expansion. The first thing that you want to ask yourself is whether your product is actually, your product or your technology or your service is actually scalable. What does this mean? This means that it will require minimal effort and not a complete revamp of your product, technology, or service offering to take this into a new market. So this could mean that you validated that your product, technology, or service is of need to your potential customers in other markets. Of course, you have to pay attention to domestic nuances across the different markets you expand to. This does not mean that you shouldn't have to make changes on your product, technology, or service. This does not mean that you shouldn't have to modify them. It just means that whatever efforts that you have to take to get your product or your technology or your service into a new market is not equivalent to starting a completely brand new business. I think once you've been able to answer that question and you've been able to determine that your product or your technology or your service offering is scalable, you should then ask yourself, why are you expanding? I think in recent years, expansion has in a way become a little bit of a buzzword, right? It's exciting to be able to say that you've built a business that services customers across 10 markets or that has operations across 10 markets. But at some point, if you're not able to answer the question of why you are expanding into the various new markets that you're going into, you will find yourself at a crossroads with your business. It will become difficult for you to make strategic decisions. It will become difficult for you to implement. It will become difficult for you to get the right talent on your team that would actually help you successfully expand. Some common reasons for expanding could be that you've identified a need for your offering in a new market, right? It could be that maybe there isn't a massive need for your offering in the market that you're planning to go to, but you have one key customer, one big customer that really wants you to provide your offering or your service in this market. That, I would argue, is also a justifiable reason for expanding. Once you've been able to determine that your product and your technology are scalable, you've been able to clearly articulate why you want to expand, and you've been able to clearly articulate how your reason for expanding will guide the decisions that you have to make for expanding, then you have to get a basic and detailed understanding of the knowledge of the market that you're trying to expand into. For me, in the course of my work at Flutterwave, I think as a company, generally, we've been able to determine why we're expanding. We want to build a Pan-African payment infrastructure, as well as products that are capable of transacting across the African continent. And the reason we're doing this is because we know that it's difficult today for businesses and individuals to transact across the continent, as well as across payment types. Armed with that knowledge, and also armed with the frequent requests that we get from the businesses that we support, we've been able to validate that expansion should be a key and structural part of our strategy. Even though we as a company, and I in my role, are aware that we should expand and that it makes sense for us to expand, I don't just wake up and decide to go to Mozambique tomorrow without doing some critical off the ground, but also on the ground research, right? And the whole goal of this research is to arm myself with knowledge. First of all, what does, specific to my industry, of course, what does the landscape, the payment landscape look like in my target country, right? What are some of the regulatory or legal considerations or even tax considerations that I need to take in place? that I need to take into consideration? What are some of the cultural nuances, especially when it relates to consumer behavior? Again, in my industry, that would be something like asking myself, how do people in my target country actually interact with digital payments today? Is this a country that's primarily cash-based? Is this a country where people are familiar with the concept of digital payments already? And so in that instance, my focus would be on how do I simplify the process of making digital payments, as opposed to a country that's pretty cash heavy, where my focus would then be on how do I get people and how do I change consumer behavior and gear them more towards transacting online. So really important to kind of ask yourself all those questions. One of the challenging things about researching target markets on the African continent is, I don't want to say the lack of information online or the lack of data online, but to a certain extent, it really is that. In a lot of our countries on the continent, you can find basic information online, but when it comes to making critical decisions or strategic decisions that will help you build a proper expansion plan that you can implement easily, chances are, or I would advise, that you spend some time in the target market, right? You go there, you meet with key stakeholders, you do some research while you're on ground. For me, when I'm expanding to a new market, I always make sure that I visit the country. I interact with the digital payment system, whether that's me going to the mall and purchasing a random item, or whether that's me going out to a restaurant and insisting to make a payment with a digital instrument as opposed to cash. I also ensure to meet with stakeholders. For me, that could range from regulators to financial institutions that will ultimately become my partner, to the many businesses that could potentially also become my customer. The whole goal of that exercise is so that I can build knowledge that will help me in my role, but also on a larger scale, help the company figure out, how do we actually position ourselves in this market? A large part of that is also understanding who in the market, in the target market today, is offering a similar product, technology, or service as you. How do they currently offer that service? And if you were to expand into the market, what will you do differently? How will you position yourself differently so that you can almost ensure that you guarantee your success? The point there is research, extremely important. In some geographies, it might be enough for you to do your research remotely. If you're expanding across Africa, I highly, highly recommend that you make the time and devote the resources to spending some time in your target market or markets. Once I've been able to gather all that information and revalidate that this is in fact a market that I want to, or the company wants to expand into, it then becomes very important to start thinking about building a team that will be based in that market. I know that the world today is a global world. I'm sitting in an office building in any part of the world. I can hop on Zoom, I can hop on WhatsApp and connect with people. But I think there is something to be said for being present in the market where you want to have operations. Again, this is going to obviously depend on the industry that you're in. I think it's also going to depend on the products that you're trying to bring into new markets. Ultimately, if you're expanding across Africa, one thing I have found out, or I have learned over the years about African businesses and African consumers, is we like to touch the things we use. We like to know that if we needed to reach someone, we can walk over, drive over, take an Uber, a taxi over, and find the people. We don't like these concepts of, things being far away from us. What I found, and it could also be a function of my industry, is that a lot of businesses, probably because we handle or we help them with their finances, we help them process transactions. A lot of businesses in the markets that I've expanded into have not taken our expansion seriously until I can tell them, this is where our physical offices in your country are. This is our country manager who is the point person for our business in this market. So again, this could change for you. If you're not in the payment industry, you can perhaps maybe disregard that because it's not pertinent to your potential customers' expectations or behaviors. But generally speaking, in my experience across the continent, that's been something that's very crucial. Now, we can't talk about building a local team without talking about sourcing talent on the African continent. I think, again, industry specific for me, or really anybody who's in the technology space, you might have experienced that it can be sometimes difficult to find tech-savvy talent across the countries we have in Africa. That's not to say that talent doesn't exist, but I think that if we put the development of technology in scope of what we're talking about and realize how recent or how recently we as a continent have embraced technology, then it starts to make sense how it can be challenging sometimes to find people who have 50 years of experience in cloud infrastructure, for example. Here, I would really just encourage you to spend part of the time in the market where you're meeting with your potential customers, you're meeting with your potential partners, you're meeting perhaps with a legal team who's going to walk you through everything that you need to do. Spend some time kind of explaining to them your company culture, what your expectations would be for people who represent your company, your product offerings in different markets. And you'll find that those people are actually going to be very instrumental in pointing you to the right direction when it comes to building your team. I also always advise, start with the most senior person that you need to hire and trust them with the responsibility of building out the rest of the team. I found that to be the most efficient way to build local teams. This is, of course, in contrast with identify that perhaps in your first year, you need to have a local team of about 10 people and trying to recruit those 10 people by yourself. It's time efficient if you just, for example, hire the most senior person. Let's say the most senior role in your structure would be a country manager. Hire your country manager. Make sure that, of course, that the person you hire meets all the needs and fits in very well with your culture as well as your expectations. And so once you've been able to identify that person, bring them on board, you can then give them the latitude to go out and build the rest of their team. It saved me a lot of time, and I'm sure it'll save you a lot of time as well. Now, once you have a team, it's ready. It's time to execute. It's execution time. All the work that you have done to this point, this is where everything culminates together to help you actually establish your presence in your target market. You've asked yourself, is your product or your technology actually easily scalable? Does it require you to basically build a brand new business? You know why you're expanding, and you can concisely and emphatically communicate to your stakeholders, whether that's the local team you're building or the people that you're partnering with or your customers while you're expanding. You have a good sense of the market, the landscape in your industry, any legal or regulatory requirements. You have a good sense of the culture. You have a good sense of how your potential customers will interact with your product offering or your technology. You've built your strategy. You've anticipated any potential challenges. You've come up with potential solutions to those challenges. In your strategy, you have plan A, plan B. If plan A doesn't work, you have a solid team on your hands. Once you have all of those things put together, it becomes very difficult for you to fail. Success is not always guaranteed, but the more prepared you are to handle things that are thrown your way, the better chance you have at success. For me, I found that approach to international expansion is what has helped me scale in my role and ultimately helped the company scale to the countries that we currently operate in. Again, please take everything I say as a suggestion. You definitely know your business better than anybody else. And I will assume that by nature of you being in said business, you also have a decent and strong knowledge of the industry within which you operate. And so some of these things may not apply to you. Some of these things you may have to pivot, but generally speaking, taking that approach to expansion has been helpful for us at Flutterwave, and I hope it is helpful for you too. I am happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Omashaliwa. We're very grateful. So in terms of questions, we already asked everyone to put their questions on a link so we can take them. We also had some questions that were pre-asked by folks in our community that we would also like you to respond to, right, if that's okay. So my first question, right, based on the ones that we have collected from our community before now. Oh, someone is saying they can't understand English fluently on the chat. Okay.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah. So again, Josiah, we're really sorry. Well, like Shalua says, apologies. My apologies as well. We hosted the call, not fully considering how far, in terms of countrywide, we would be getting, folks from. So we didn't really prepare for our brothers in the Francophone countries. So we're really sorry. What's going to happen most likely is for you, Josiah, and any other person who is primarily Francophone, we should be releasing an article after, of course, this meeting, just talking about some of the insights that Omashaliwa has shared. And so we would, I'm not promising, but we'll see how we can maybe get a French version of that sent out to you, Josiane, and any other person who may want to read the French version. So we'll see how we can work towards that. So
we can help with that. I have a couple of teammates who are French speaking. So if you need any assistance with the translation, I'm sure that we can work on it together.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalom. Okay, so first question. So again, we know that, going into some of these countries would not be without its own challenges, right? Like you said, you talked about cultural nuances. I know, for example, what we just discovered now, language barrier, is another thing that may come up. But can you maybe give us, things that were, significant challenges that you did not expect to see and how you went about them, to just how you creatively, of course, navigated them and the solutions that you deployed?
Yeah, I think by nature of the industry that I'm in, one hot topic is always on regulatory requirements from fintechs like ourselves. I think for the most part, many African countries in the last decade, perhaps 2 decades, have started to make provision for non-banking financial institutions in the regulations around payments and payment activity. Sometimes it can be a little challenging to understand how those regulations fit into the full scope of services that we're planning to offer. But one thing that has always been very helpful is definitely making sure that we are engaging a local legal team in the target market, as well as directly also engaging with regulators where applicable. I think what this allows us to do is remove any room for misinterpretation, really, because when I'm sitting in front of a regulator, or when our team is sitting in front of a regulator, or we're sitting in front of our legal teams, we're really able to go into the details of our product offerings and our plans for the market. And we're really able to seek their guidance on how they would classify us, according to the different regulations that they have, and what that means in terms of the requirements that they have for us. Now, again, I understand that this is something that might be industry specific, but ultimately, I would always advise sitting down with the legal team that's from the market that you're trying to expand into, to understand what might apply to you from a legal perspective. I think another major challenge is, I think that on the continent, we're slowly starting to embrace the idea of collaboration a little more than we have in the past. And so when we initially began expanding, we had this philosophy at the company that nothing is really competition, right? If we probed hard enough, if we looked hard enough, even to the next company who seems to be in direct competition with us, we could find a way to collaborate with them, partner with them, increase the size of the pie, build a better offering for the customers in the market that we're looking to expand into. And in the early days, that didn't used to be the smoothest conversation. A lot of times met with representatives of different companies, go over, the company brief, go over our products and what we're trying to accomplish. And for a while there, the almost or next immediate question that, I would get is, okay, so you're in competition with me then. And it took, I think, a lot of changes in the industry for many of us to realize that it's not going to be a one company effort to build long-lasting solutions to the problem of digital payments on the African continent. And so at some point, we're all going to need to collaborate with each other. Maybe I've built a payment acceptance platform, but what if I'm finding that my customers in this market need access to loans that can help them better manage their working capital? That might not be an investment that we as a company want to make and build that capability from scratch. So what if we partner with an existing company whose core business model is this? Or another good example is when we launched our Flutterwave store product, which is an e-commerce platform that allows businesses to go online, create a store, and essentially get their own dedicated website. We knew that eventually we would want to build logistics into the product, right? If a business has created an online store with us and they sold physical goods, those physical goods needed to make way from them to their customers. But our core business is payments. We, at this point, are not interested in being a logistics company. There are many logistic companies out there who also, by nature of how difficult African payments are, have had to pivot into also building payment products. And so from that perspective, they might see us as competition. But if I could position myself as a channel for them on their primary business, which is logistics, I've figured out a way to move away from the question of, okay, so you're my competition. I think it all just comes down to the creativity of understanding your business, understanding the capabilities of your business, understanding your potential competitions, which I like to call a partner, understanding their business, and finding a middle ground where you both can really collaborate.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mashallah. That's really rich. And I picked from what you said, three major things. Number one, always, go by the rules, engage a lawyer, try to understand what the legal system there is, number one. Number two, understand your product and from that point, understand your potential partners or people that you may as well have called competitors, but they could actually be, your collaborators if you look at it just a bit differently. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so my next question really, and it's for me, it's a really big question, would be around something you said while you were speaking earlier about recruiting people into your company in those markets, right? I reckon that earlier this year, someone from a startup in Nigeria reached out to me saying, oh, they wanted to recruit someone in Cameroon, and do I know anybody in Cameroon? And so I had to go to AfriLabs, so ask AfriLabs to get me a hub there, talk to the hub manager, and then it was really sort of stressful to get talent in those countries. So how have you been able to, get talent, and how have you been able to verify that they are, you're talking about they should be the kind of talent you need. So how have you been able to get those talents, number one, and how have you been able to kind of keep the quality at a particular level in those countries?
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Finding talent on the continent is very difficult. I think perhaps even a little bit more difficult in fintech, because fintech is such a new-ish industry on the continent. And so I think if you're trying to hire newer talent, you might have an easier time. But for someone like me or a company like Flutterwave, where we have this strategy where we want to start with the most senior hire in a country and give them the latitude to build their team, it can be very difficult to find that really senior person who understands fintech, who understands payments, and can then take that knowledge as well as understanding of the country nuances, layer it on top of the overall strategy that we have, and really help us build a plan for success. Some of the things that we've done is work with recruiting agencies. I think that perhaps that's been the most efficient route for us. So usually our people team is very good at identifying companies who help you with the end-to-end process for recruiting. Other things that I myself have done is literally sign up for LinkedIn Premium and crawl LinkedIn looking for people who have done fintech, who have done payments, or who have exposure to the industry. Whenever I do go to visit a country, if there are like any industry mixers, if potential partners, anybody is throwing an event, or whenever I go to a conference in a country, I do my best to network as much as possible. I say do my best because I'm not so much of a people person. I get easily exhausted by conversation with a lot of people. But I do my best to network with as much people as possible, understanding their backgrounds, even if the person I'm networking with does not end up being the person who is the talent that we recruit. You never know who else is in their network that could be a great fit for the position that you're looking to fill. I think that those are all short-term solutions to the issue of talent sourcing on the continent. I think that eventually, as private sector participants, we need to help build a long-term problem. And what I mean by that is easily illustrated with a program that we just started at Flutterwave. We started in Nigeria with a graduate trainee program where we are going out into the market, recruiting people with not that many years of experience, not even any requirement for experience in the fintech space, and bringing them in-house with the knowledge that we're going to have to train and develop these people, help them understand the industry, help them understand the company, help them understand the respective departments that we have across the company, because ultimately, with the hope that the educational system and the structures that we have on the continent get better, ultimately private entity participants will have at some point to go through that process to really secure the talent that you need to help you scale.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Omashalewa. So a few things I've picked from what you said. I think it's important that when you're looking to expand into a new country, you are very sure that you can afford to pay the most senior person in that country, because that's a super hack that can help you just essentially just commit the work of recruiting to that person. I mean, at the end of the day, it's that person who's going to lead the team in the country. So why not just go for, the very top and then allow the person just get their team? Do you want to say something, Michelle?
Yeah, and I fully understand that that can in of itself be a challenge. The reason I recommend that being the way to go is because we've tried it the other way around, right? We've tried it the other way around of, maybe just getting an analyst in a target market to help with the research and help us with information that we can ultimately put together to build a strategy. It doesn't really work. Maybe it worked in some instances, but in the full scope or in the long scale of things, there are very few times when that has been successful, because each African country, or really any country in the world, has things that are unique about it. And you really need an experienced person to be able to help you understand those nuances, and even more importantly, help you understand how those nuances impact your planned business so that you can just kick off on the right foot.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. I mean, that would have been the other route that maybe anybody on the call, including myself, would probably have thought about. If we don't have the money to probably hire a country manager, I'll probably be thinking, let's get an analyst to do the groundwork. But then, thank you for this perspective. It's better.
Yeah, that's not to say it doesn't work. I'm sure it could work, right? If you went through the process and you found yourself, that superstar. But then again, sometimes it's not always just about people's ability to do the work, right? It's also about the connections that they've been able to build over their many years of experience. And again, everything I say is partly with a grain of salt, because everybody's situation is always going to be different. So if those types of connections are something that you think or believe will really help you be successful in your expansion, then it's much easier to just try as much as possible to get it on day one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And well, while you were talking, someone asked that, can you recommend certain marketing agencies or market entry agencies as well, or recruitment agencies that you've worked with? Again, the question is very big because you've been in how many countries now? So, and I don't know if you worked for just one across all the countries. So do you want to mention one?
So with many things across the African continent, it's never just one across many countries. A lot of things are still fragmented. I'll drop my email. If you just let me know what specific countries you're interested in, I will look through my very old emails and get you some recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to recopy your email and post it to everyone because I realized that.
Oh, I didn't send it to everyone.
Yeah, it was only sent to those in the waiting room.
My bad.
No worries. I've sent it out to everyone now.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we already have certain questions coming on the back end. But then I would just like to ask this one. Yeah. And I think you've spoken to it, of course, largely. But I'll probably lump two questions together because you've spoken to them, but I just want to lump it together. The first question is around financing your expansion. And I know that, you know, the typical answer to that is, oh, go and raise maybe series funding, have enough money, right, to then finance your expansion. But then it's typically also tied to certain indicators, I believe, right? Do you want to, on a very generic scale, talk about some of the indicators that you think people should look out for? Or maybe that, you know, you were able to, you know, that also maybe informed expansion, especially because not only moving out of Nigeria to the first African country, but then even moving from country to country. What were the metrics you looked at, you know, to say, oh, okay, I think it's time to move now, you know, and what informed that pretty much?
So I definitely don't, let me take a quick step back. So with any business, there's always a need for an upfront investment. And expanding your business is no different, right? You will always need to have that upfront investment that you can put into building your business before you can bring the customers on board that will hopefully repay your investment and then begin to generate profits. So that's not to say that if you don't have a Series X that you shouldn't expand. I think it all comes down to going through the playbook that we've talked about, right? Answering some of those critical questions and being able to validate that this expansion makes sense for you. Because then when it comes to perhaps going to outside sources to raise funds, even though you might not have a customer yet, or you might not have revenues or sales on the board yet, if you can go to a potential investor and fully articulate what your plan is, I think that it's a lot easier for you to get access to the resources that you need. Another thing that I highly encourage doing, which at this point I think might only be relevant to tech companies or tech startups, is really considering being a part of an accelerator program. I think in my time at Flutterwave, we've been through 3 or 4 at minimum accelerator programs, because it's not just the fact that many of them give you access or give you visibility to fundraise. It's also the many resources that they provide to you, from, you know, advisors that could help you refine your strategy. It's very simple things like office space, right? So if you're going into a new country and you don't even have to think about, you know, the additional expense of an office space, that's definitely something that you should take advantage of. And I think at the end of the day, many accelerator programs will at least give you some level of investment or a grant to also kickstart your business or kickstart your expansion.
Okay, so I know that some startups that are on this call, right, are seeing expansion as something that is like way down the line, right? And maybe something that they typically don't need in the short term, or they don't see themselves getting into in the short term, right? So my question really is, and again, maybe it's a bit, you know, maybe it's repetitive, because for me, what I just want to also help bridge is where some of these startups currently are and where Flutterwave has got into. Sincerely, it is almost like, you know, it almost feels like Flutterwave has now really moved to a full company stage, even though it's just 6 years old, and has moved away from the startup phase, you know, almost completely, right? So my question really is, do you think that startups that are still, you know, or let me rephrase, do you think that there are, again, specific, I don't want to call them indicators now, specific, should I call them metrics that they can set for themselves that can help them venture out before they feel comfortable to venture out? So especially taking a cue from Flutterwave, I believe that, you know, you probably did not just move out because you thought, oh, now we are very big, right? There must have been a level of ambition to it, and you must have thought, okay, maybe milestones. Thank you. Someone has given me
That's the key word. Ambition.
Exactly.
Ambition. From day one, you have to know that you want to expand, whether that's geographically or whether that's in product offering. From day one, you have to build your startup, you have to build your company with that mindset of expansion. That doesn't mean you have to begin executing on it on day two, but I think having that idea of expansion and having, I don't want to call it a culture, but like a culture of expansion from day one, it really does guide your decision making, and it really does guide how you build your strategy. I think for us, anytime you speak to GB, by the time I joined the company, we were just primarily a Nigerian company, right? But even throughout my interview process, it was always understood that we wanted to build a Pan-African company, right? The goal was never to just build a Nigerian payment company. Now, we understand that Nigeria is a pretty significant market when it comes to payments on the African continent, but the problem that we were really driving at was to build a Pan-African payment infrastructure, build a solution to the problem of fragmented payments across the African continent, build a solution that would incorporate the different participants in the payments ecosystem, whether that's a business that's accepting payments or an individual that's making payments. So from day one, there was already that ingrained in the strategy of the company. And so what we needed to figure out was just when and how.
So I'm just trying to unmute. Absolutely, exactly what I was, trying to get to with that particular question. Because again, I think that there is that element of more or less knowing where you want to go to right from the get-go that I think has really greatly helped Flutterwave in, running what they, running their vision essentially. And going Pan-African is something that we hear in many startups speech. When they say, oh, we're going to build a panel. But again, not everybody takes the time to hire the right talent that would help them fulfill that vision, or even draw the strategy on the table that would eventually take them to that place. And most people just wait for a particular time that may not come, where they feel like, oh, we don't have enough money, let's start knocking on the doors of other countries. So thank you very much for that perspective.
And also just to say, having that mindset of in the future expanding geographically or expanding your product offering, it doesn't mean that whatever you said on day one has to be, right? With everything in life, you always have to reconsider the circumstances, re-strategize and pivot if necessary, right? So maybe you wanted to expand to all 54 countries on the continent, but as you get mature in the evolution of your company, you realize that 10 markets are actually not ready for your product offering. That's fine, right? It doesn't affect the whole idea or the whole mindset of expansion. And something really critical that you said just now, if expansion is in your plans, you absolutely have to make sure that it filters into the team that you're building, because you don't want, unless you have the resources to hire everyone on the continent, you don't want to build a team that doesn't have the vision that you have. Because even if you have the budget, you raise the money that's going to help you expand. If your head of information technology does not understand or does not align with your vision for expansion, it's not really going to work out.
Absolutely, I agree. And again, guys, communication. Ensure that in whatever you're doing, you're able to sell your vision to your teammates, as much as possible. So we're running out of time, so we would only take a few questions, unfortunately. Again, some things that people are asking, for example, I know that you've spoken to them, one of which is what are the key indicators you see that assure you of a smooth expansion into new markets? Is that something you've spoken to, or do you want to quickly take that for a minute so we can just rush through the questions?
I think there are many things, right? One is the business plan, like the viability of the business that you're trying to expand into a new country. If you're trying to sell socks in a country where it's 40°C every day and people only wear sandals, then maybe you need to reconsider that, right? But I think if you've been able to validate that your business is well suited for this market, your people are very, very, very important, because at some point you can't be everywhere and you can't keep your eyes on everything, and you will have to decentralize strategizing, you will have to decentralize decision making. And so metric is having the right people that will help you drive your vision forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much. I'm just going to run through really, we have like multiple questions, maybe 6, 10 or something. So someone is asking me if Flutterwave runs or supports an accelerator or incubator program.
Not at this point, but we've been through a few. Happy to recommend the ones that we've been through, and who knows, in the future, we might.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, great. So someone is saying that our organization is a non-profit organization, and that do you think that the same steps that was taken, that Flutterwave took, would also apply to a non-profit organization?
I think that's some parts of it. I've never worked at a nonprofit, so of course I don't have industry experience, but I think on some level, some of the concepts could apply, right? I think the same thing, validating your business idea, right? Whatever your nonprofit is supporting, are there people in your target country that have a need for that? And I think especially with nonprofits, understanding what the public infrastructure of support is for your idea is very important, because in a lot of ways, it might be easier to build things that are complementary, or perhaps things that plug gaps in the public infrastructure and make it a little bit more efficient. So I think different words, but generally the same concept, for the most part, should apply.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. And well, with anything expansion, again, I'm Precious who asked the questions. With anything expansion, I think one of the key things that Shalewa has stressed today is that the countries are unique, so you need to have plans for those countries. Again, if you're trying to sell socks in a country that is 40°C, which is in a pretty hot country, you would essentially, you don't have a market for it. So not for profit, again, is very peculiar, because you're probably trying to do something that is social, and then social realities, while across Africa, can be a bit similar. I mean, poverty is ravaging almost the entire continent. Technology penetration is low almost across the entire continent. But then there are a few places where, they are more advanced in terms of how they've solved their social challenges, that I feel like, whatever you want to bring in may not be applicable. So I think one thing that is really key, just to stretch, that Omashalewa has said before, is the need to study your market, have a plan, have something that works, before you try to expand into any market. Okay, so we're just going to rush. Someone is saying that how were you able to expand to 19 countries in 6 years? And this, I want you to answer it in this particular way, just before you talk. Let me rephrase that question. What was the secret sauce that Omoshalewa used to get to 19 countries in 6 years?
It's actually something I've said before. I see a couple people from my team in this meeting, and the reality is it was them. I mean, in the first few years, I practically did not sleep. I practically lived on an airplane. out of a hand luggage. But at the end of the day, expansion is not a one-woman initiative. And I know I've said it 50 times, probably already on this call, your team, talent, they did it. I think perhaps where I was useful was being able to clearly articulate the company and our goals. And then, you know, getting the right people who can help us scale our vision.
I like that. That's really true. I like the fact that you are really talking about the people. I feel like you wouldn't have been able to do it without people. I like that you're acknowledging it. So talent is a major part of expanding. I also feel like there are certain things that we may not be able to get into today that you said slightly, but I just want to just quickly mention them just so that certain people can also learn from them. One of it is that you cannot be an introvert and lead expansion. Even though Omoshaliwa said she's not really comfortable having lengthy conversation with too many people, you can see that she's literally almost had to overcome that, so she's able to do what she does. I think another interesting thing is you need to pay attention to your health. If you're going to be traveling for almost a whole year and living out of an handbag, it may sound fun to you that you're hopping from country to country, but wait until you realize the pressure you've put on your lungs and and on your health. So two things I just wanted to say that are a bit more subtle, but I believe they are really, really important to stretch. So we've run out of time. There's one question that is interesting, but we won't be able to take it, sorry, because we have very limited time. But what we would do most likely is, again, you have Omoshalewa's email. Omoshalewa, I'm sorry, I'm not about to ask people to spam you, but if your question is really, really important and you think that you'd like to ask Omoshalewa directly, please shoot her an email. She would, of course, be glad to respond to that.
Absolutely. Okay, so I could turn off my introvertedness to answer a few critical questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're grateful for that. So we've run out of time. Thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure having Omoshalewa Adeyemi join us from Flutterwave. Thank you for all the great jobs you've done. So just by way of wrapping up, so a little bit about what we do at FCMB and at Hub1. We have a physical hub where we support startups in Yaba, Lagos. We at FCMB also have specific products that are relevant to startups across from banking, infrastructure, services to funding. But I say that with carefulness. So funding for us is not that the bank funds. The bank cannot fund. But the FCMB group, as a group, has been able to support certain businesses over the past few years. We've invested in certain businesses, and our average size ticket is around 400,000 USD. And we've been doing that now for about 4 years. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing at FCMB, you want to jump on our infrastructure, you want to potentially gain partnerships or whatever, I would drop you a link. I'll probably give my email as well. Please feel free to write to me anytime. I'm very happy to discuss and to see what we can do together. So that brings me to the end of the meeting. Thank you again for joining us. We're grateful. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.